The Christian Moral Tradition, Introduction and Moral Landscape. The relationship between Judaism and Christianity. Christianity is seen by some to be either the successor to Judaism or perhaps its wayward child. The truth may be a bit more difficult. What is the relationship between Judaism and Christianity? Let me suggest that Judaism and Christianity are more like siblings that have each gone their own way. Going back to the first centuries BCE and CE, there emerged three distinct movements in late Second Temple Judaism, of which we know: the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essenes. Of these, only one party, that is, the Pharisees, survived past the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 CE. Then this surviving branch itself had been developing two movements that differed on two questions: whether Jesus was the Messiah and what to do with the Gentiles. Christianity embraced Jesus as the promised Messiah and embraced the Gentiles as full members of the community. What became Rabbinic Judaism did not on either count. In time, Gentiles dominated the Jesus movement such that it developed its own independent reality or identity. Judaism, untethered from the temple, also developed in its own way distinctions quite different from its origins. The distinctives of Christianity. So, how does Christianity diverge from Judaism, and how does this affect the moral landscape? The first is a matter of what each movement holds to be authoritative writings. Judaism has the Tanakh, to which Christianity adds the Gospels, Acts, the Epistles, and the Book of Revelation. We'll call these the Gospels and Epistles for short. The Gospels and Epistles are concerned with how the God described in the Tanakh is revealed or embodied in the person of Jesus of Nazareth, as seen in his care of the sick, the hungry, the poor, women, and outcasts. The Gospel focuses on the life and ministry of Jesus. In the epistles, we see how this is worked out within the Christian community as communities in mutual respect and forbearance. We also see a working out of the meaning of just who Jesus is and what Jesus' redemptive work was about. The question of who Jesus is led to a Trinitarian theology. This might well be the most significant divergence from Judaism. It is not simply a theological parting of the ways, but it marks a shift in emphasis from right practice, orthopraxy, which is typical of Judaism, to right belief, or orthodoxy, which is a more common concern and contention within Christianity. One can see this shift in the way we think of ethics as well, from looking at the development of good character to the primacy of knowing the proper framework for right action. Even so, one thing about the Trinity that should be kept in mind is that it is essentially relational. Relationships, which we can only understand between others, is actually essential to what it is to exist. A summary of the tradition. Despite its emphasis on right belief, that is orthodoxy, against right action or orthopraxy, Christianity shares much of the moral landscape found in Judaism. We've already seen in Judaism the centrality of the idea that creation belongs to God and things in God's creation are essentially good. We have also seen in the idea of the covenant that God continues to work to bring human beings into right relationship with God. With its notion of the fall, Christianity has a somewhat ambiguous relationship with creation. But Christianity underscores God's desire to reconcile the world by declaring that God is love and that God's justice must be seen in that light. That God is said to have dwelt with human beings in the person of Jesus also emphasizes that God wants to be in communion with human beings as human beings, and that we should therefore be in communion with each other. Christians maintain that this can be found in the life and ministry of Jesus, who should serve as our pattern of life. An example: peace and war. What is peace? Hyde would suggest, and I would agree, that peace is more than simply the absence of war, and that war is not so much the presence of conflict, but the absence of peace. Peace is the reality. Peace is where human beings find harmony and wholeness with each other. It is the state that we were meant for. War is the distortion of that reality. Over the centuries, Christians have found different ways with dealing with the breakdown of peace. Pacifism may be Christianity's earliest response. The taking of human life and serving in the military were seen as unacceptable. Christians were not seen to be of this world, and for a few hundred years they were a disenfranchised minority. To greatly oversimplify things, this position started to break down as Christianity became acceptable, and Christians had the responsibility of defending the state. Nonviolent action is a way of confronting evil without violence. This would include boycotts, strikes, demonstration, and deliberately breaking laws that are seen as unjust. The goal of such action is to reveal the nature of injustice and violence, and to either shame the perpetrators of violence and injustice or delegitimize them. Following the words of Jesus not to resist evil, the response of just peacekeeping is that in the face of war and other evils is to work for that which makes peace. Instead of confronting evil directly, the goal is to forge alternatives. The just war theory was first proposed by Augustine of Hippo in the 4th century. Just war theory responds to the breakdown of peace by asking under what conditions and to what ends war may be waged. It limits who may wage war, the scope of war, under what conditions war may be waged, what aims are justified, who can be involved, the extent of combat, and and how war should be concluded. For a war to be just, it must be declared by a legitimate ruler or governing body, and it must always be defensive in nature. Its aim is protection, not expansion of power. For a war to be just, the least possible action must be taken against the adversary. One should never kill when injury will do, never injure when restraint will do, never restrain when negotiations will do, and so forth. A just war can only involve combatants since its aim is to protect. Finally, for a war to be just, it must be concluded with the aim of reconciling all sides, and not to take vengeance or oppress the vanquished. We will pick up on this, and we will try to apply the just war criteria to a given war and see if we can come to any conclusions.